This is the second video looking at the possibility that old-time amusement parks were repurposed industrial zones. I think there's a lot of possibility that that is true. Just a lot of that clicks with me. It makes sense. I'll share some slides today that really go along with that idea. And yeah, there's something to that idea that I think is true. And maybe not all the time it was that. It is also possible that the old world did have amusement parks. And maybe I'll do a future video on that because Ferris wheels are a big one, but I don't know, something about the word Ferris and Ferris wheels makes me think that that was industrial in nature. But carousels, there's so many historical carousels out there, and they are beautifully made. The mechanisms of a lot of these carousels are very interesting. They have rich, histories, but I think that the real history is probably so much more interesting. And that's how this fake history thing often is. Often the history that they tell you, that's just like the beginning. That's the most recent thing. Usually that's just the history of the most recent person who found this thing. So just to talk about the carousel for a second, a lot of these historic carousels, they'll have a story, and some guy will have made the whole thing in the 1900s or something by himself or his family or whatever. But I think it's much more likely that these carousels were being found and refurbished, that people would find them, and they are really cool machinery and beautiful works of art, highly ornamented. And so you either have to destroy it, burn it down, or somebody has to be dedicated enough to refurbish it and get it up and running again. And so that's what I think. When you hear about a historic carousel and there's a family in the early 1900s who allegedly built all of this stuff, I don't really believe that all the time. Maybe sometimes that happened, but I think a lot of the time they were just refurbishing something and then passing it off as their own, and history was still being restarted at this point. And anyways, let's get into this video. Maybe foreshadow into a future video focusing on historic carousels. I think that carousels are from the old world. Okay. Jerry Seinfeld once told David Letterman his father was a Coney Island incubator baby. Just a weird detail, makes you wonder. And apparently Seinfeld's mom was also an orphan. The history reset really didn't happen that long ago, and I think that one of the most interesting things that people have been suggesting, in this sort of community recently, is that they're still coming up with BS today, and they're still today demolishing old sites, and today they're still digging places out and finding new things and coming up with new fake backstories or just hiding it. And they certainly were still doing it in the early 1900s, still digging old places out of mud, or there were just old abandoned places, and you come in and you have to decide, am I going to chop down all the vines and paint up the place to make it look nice and new, put up new facades? A lot of times they would take these old buildings and just build facades over them, build a wooden facade over the older building. Anyways, let's get into it. What started all of this research was looking at these old gasworks are really cool and already look ancient. That is something that you will absolutely notice when looking at the old photos, is that there will be a lot of old photos that already look ancient. And I don't know, reminds me of the aqueducts and stuff. And they tell you all sorts of lies about that. You know how they're always like, oh, the Roman aqueducts were like lined in lead. They probably were lined in gold, and people came and took all the gold away. And maybe lead was one of the layers, but I highly doubt that somebody could build amazing arches that are made out of concrete that we don't even know how to do today, and that they're still standing today, but that they were poisoning themselves with lead. That doesn't make sense. You can't have both of those together, where there's these people that had a culture that was so rich that they built things that are still around today and that still take our breath away with their beauty, and yet you want me to believe that they were at the same time just wretched and stupid. I don't buy that. I think that they were just better. Those old Renaissance photos or paintings of like the Play-Doh type generation, and how they're all wearing robes and walking around barefoot. I think that these cities were so clean and pristine. I think that they were just levels above us that we'll never understand. You know how a lot of people today, how many people today that are smart cookies, well educated, they have all the money in the world, what do they decide to do? Go live off the grid, get away from this cancer society. And there's just because people don't have an iPhone in their hand or have like a desktop computer, people automatically assume that times past were like less developed than us today. I highly disagree with that. Look at this cool old photo. Already looking ancient. Again, a glass negative. They had really good photo technology way back in the 1800s. That's a lie that they tell you about. Cool antenna on top of one of those. And the sky looks very odd in this photo. I was seriously going to try to not ramble in this video, but I've already done so much rambling. They don't build them like they used to. Wow. And then you got the two guys outside. So this one was from Los Angeles. I just have a few photos before I get to the actual amusement park stuff. Los Angeles has such a strange history. LA even has, or used to have, like a downtown old world looking. Nowadays LA doesn't look anything like that, but LA had some weird things going on. All those oil fields. The golden age of amusement parks. The operation of amusement ride machinery has many similarities to the operation of large industrial machines. So this was a good slide to get into this video. This looked absolutely industrial to me. Just, it looks like it could have been some sort of industrial conveyor belt system, or, you know, rail system taking stuff from one place to another place, and they just made them look like a horse and turned it into an amusement park ride. Something about this just looks not amusement parky. Like, where's the theming? And in the middle of these big buildings, it just doesn't scream amusement. It screams, this used to be industrial and it was turned. That makes more sense to me when I look at this picture, like repurposed. I don't know, odd. It's strange to me. The feelings that these things give me is off. Bright orange. If you know about my channel, you've seen a lot of videos. I talk about orange a lot. It's a big deal, and it's been a big deal since the last reset. It's an inside joke. This orange color, notice that orange color hasn't really changed. That's the same bright, obnoxious orange that these people obsess over today. And they were doing it way back then, too. Coney rhymes with phony, and cone, a cone is also a pyramid shape. So we got some Illuminati ideas. But what a demented look, too. And those are, like, look at the hair. Looks like horns on the left side and the right side. Airships were a thing. This looks like an oil platform, but I mean, it also looks decked out. Apparently it was an air thing. I don't know. But that was a thing of the old world. Just like the old world used to have streetcars in every town. Every single town used to have streetcars in it. It just was a way that these people lived. That was the way that the society was. You wouldn't make a new town and not build it with that kind of infrastructure in it. They similarly had airship places for the airships to dock. And so other people have done lots of videos on this, like Eiffel Tower probably was an airship dock. They did not build Eiffel Tower. They had to just pass off a story, hey, I built that. That was left over from the old world. But there were all sorts of buildings that look like the Eiffel Tower, too, all over the world. So, you know, it's part of that issue of too much stuff. They just have too much stuff, so they just furiously write backstories because they think that if they can write a story about it, that explains it away. One of the earliest amusement parks in the West, Columbia something, CC, though, CC 33. It's in Montana. I know I cut it off at the bottom there, but So extravagant. This would be extravagant to build today in Montana. What was going on? And yeah, that's just a theme. Where do they get this amazing infrastructure for all this stuff? It's like it was just already there and they just had to walk into the place. And yeah, that makes so much more sense. They don't have proof of these places being built. We see the same looking architecture all over the place, and we see the same looking bozos claiming that they built it. It doesn't match. It doesn't parse out. How can all of these different people be so skilled at this one style of architecture? And anyways, I don't need to. If you're here watching this video, you're probably familiar with this concept of falsified history and free masonry. The reason that it's called free masonry is because it was free. They didn't have to pay for it. They didn't have to build it. They didn't have to do anything. They founded it, and they had to pay for the little plaque where they make up the new date. Rail was all over the place. I mean, rail in itself is a great topic. And I think rail was an old world tech that was all over the world already. And a lot of times they were just digging up the old rail and refurbishing it. Anyways, electric parks. The reason I included this is because nearly every major city in America had at least one amusement park. So we are living in the crumbs of the old world. And at the beginning of a reset, it's like a playground for these people. And, why not? Multiple amusement parks for every city. And they're full of lights. Like, everyone is lit up like Disneyland. They're just lost to time. There were so many of these places that it's just lost to time, basically. And how do you rationalize that there were hundreds of Disneyland before Disneyland even existed, and it was such a commonplace thing that nobody even cares about it anymore? Like, how does that history fit in? I think this is a good example of, this was probably a boat launch of some type, and they just repurposed it into a ride. Cool buildings in the background. Really cool buildings. Guild, that's making me think Freemasonry type things. Oh, this is a good point to stop and ramble more about hats. Ever wonder why so many of those brotherhood organizations, they have weird hats? Even some of the woman organizations are all about the hat. And that reminds me of the video I just did. I was talking about the hats a bunch, and somebody left a comment that said that the clothes that they were wearing were like uniforms that were handed out to them. And all of this sounds very, very believable to me. Of course, when people talk like this in a matter of fact, oh, this is how it happened, that's their opinion, and it's up to you to say, oh yeah, I like that idea, that sounds right, or to discard it. Just like you can do that with the standard narrative. Like, the standard narrative, what they say, it's just not believable to me, so you can discard it. This is a really cool idea that somebody said, that the clothes that they were wearing were like uniforms, and the hat told your social status. And that's why you always see everybody with hats and wearing their suits, because that's the only clothes they had, really. It was a fresh restart, and they were being handed these things like their uniforms. So I threw out the idea of maybe the weather was wacky too, so that's why they look like they're wearing so many clothes. But the hat thing being an indication of your status, that I like that idea. That sounds about right. That you could tell who a person was by what they were wearing after the reset. And yeah, something about that. And I mean, it just reminds me of that time period, like thinking of things that were popular tropes in these times periods, like how orphanages were a big topic. Just the idea of putting on a uniform and you like become that person. That's almost always been a big idea in this place, that it's the uniform that says who the person is, according to this society. Okay, back to this image though. That couldn't this just have been a simple boat launch or something? And they just repurposed it to a ride. Council Crest, 1,200 feet above the city, just so extravagant. Yeah, why not? Build an amusement park. This is supposed to be kind of a fresh society. I mean, what year are we at now? But It's just never the thing. It's never what you think is going on. This is the early 1900s. Why not have an amusement park on top of a hill? Like Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens. Oh, they're giving uh, different elevations. How high up is this one? Maybe those are I bet those are probably the different mountains that you can see from there, I would imagine. So, yeah, maybe this used to be an amusement park before the reset, and so they just had to go in and find it and get it all up and running again, or something industrial turned into something new. Take Council Crest Car, the grandest view in America. Council Crest Dance Hall at the top of the town was the place to go on a summer evening. There was a scenic railway and the Columbia River waterlog ride, which encircled the park. To me, that seems like it could have been some sort of railway system for the industry and a waterway system for some industry that lived up there. Or I'm open to the possibility that theme parks just were a thing in the old world, just like they're a thing today. If they did a history reset today, there would be some theme parks left over, and people could decide to refurbish it or burn it to the ground. And anyways, I could always ramble. I have thoughts. This almost reminded me of the moving. Do you guys remember when that kind of got disclosed? That in the Victorian times they had crazy what we would think of today as technology, and that's always just a good discussion. What is technology? What should impress us when it comes to technology? I think mechanical stuff is very impressive technology-wise, and the little automatons that they used to build, like the little singing, chirping birds. I mean, that's very high tech. So people allow the society and the media to dictate to them what is high tech. Anyways, do you guys know about the moving boardwalks, like the moving sidewalks that existed in Victorian times? I don't think that they built that. I think that they just were able to get it up and running again. But that's what this almost looks like. Anyways, what is this? So I'm just going to read through the slides and figure out the reason. Conceived. The power company conceived of Columbia Beach. That's just a word I see come up a lot of times, and interesting. Like, that's not the word that I would have thought of, and it's a con word, to conceive of. So it's like that's when they hatch the plan. They just speak about things in strange ways sometimes, where it's like I feel like they're sending certain messages. All right, all extravagant for just thousands of people. You know, it rivals, these things in my mind rival that of today's Disneyland, but they're only supposed to have thousands of patrons, and people had to like travel huge distances to go there. It just doesn't make sense to me that there would be. Where's the money? Where's the funny? How it never makes sense logistically that you would build an amusement park once you had an established population somewhere. That makes sense. To have multiple amusement parks that are competing with each other in no man's land that people have to travel to doesn't make sense unless the infrastructure was already there, in which case, yeah, it makes sense. A lot of this looked industrial in nature to me. Like, these swing rides could easily have been just some sort of centrifuge thing where they would put material on this and spin it around for a while just to make some sort of separation. I could see swings like that being industrial in nature. Where's the theming? I don't see the theming. It just looks like bare bones. Literally looks like they walked into a place and were like, oh, how can I turn this into a ride? And anyways. And something about that classic design of the roller coaster. I don't know what it is, but why in such a fresh time you would think that it would all look like different. Like, oh, yeah, that one was just designed by Joe Schmo. But they all follow the same design, as if, I don't know, they're a cookie cutter part that appeared in many places. Like it was just some sort of conveyor system or cooling system. You know what that actually reminds me of? Watching like how it's made, and when they're baking something and then it goes on these long cooling things. I don't know. $1 million playground. 123 acres. Okay. Huge Dipper roller coaster, the thrill rides, the midway games, and midget auto racing. There was also the Golden Canopied Ballroom, which attracted big name bands and people from all over the world which came to compete in the dance competitions, which were complete with orchestras. We'll get to the dancing in a second. It's very interesting. This is when Dance Marathon Circuit, pay attention to the word circuit, because that's an electrical word. That'll come back in a second. The Great Walkathons, where they would pack in 6,000 people and many more lined up outside to get in. Okay, somebody wanted, this guy, Seltzer, like seltzer water, went on to start roller derby. They claim that the ballroom was built at a cost of $60,000. They were only open for 3 seasons. And fire is going to be the end of most of these places. Okay, dancing was still popular after they burned this place down, so they had to make a makeshift place to dance. There's a lot of things in their story that don't make sense. Like, they will always be complaining about funding and things like that, but then it's like it got built anyways. This dance, so to talk about this dance place in particular, okay, but it got built. How, if you're having trouble, how did it get built? We'll see later that they talk about, they try to pretend like this was a failed park or something and that they didn't actually build stuff, but you did. You built this crazy dance hall that brought in 6,000 people. So you did that. You did something. But then when you look at their headquarters, it's something like this. So there's just too much disconnect. How is this your headquarters, but then you're building a ballroom that is like so famous? We'll see it has a 100-foot gold dome on the top. How do you build that? But then this is where your headquarters are, and they look like gangsters, and they're all doing, well, except the guy on the far left who has his hand on his hip. They're all doing hidden hand. They're sticking a hand in their pocket. And they look like absolute gangsters, but this was supposed to be, this is like the headquarters, and this is what they built. Yes, they could build a wood shack. Yes, they were capable of that. And look at the vibes on this. I think they found this. I think that this was the aesthetic of the old world at this creepy place. So maybe this is a good example of a place that really did used to be some sort of amusement place, and they found it. And because there's something otherworldly about that. This reminds me of the really bizarro movies that, to me, they don't seem like these are the type of movies that people would make if they just started making movies. They seem so out there and bizarre that it's like they're miles ahead of even David Lynch. So that's what this makes me think of, that this was already there. It's just strange. I don't see that building as being made by those gangsters, is what it is. It just doesn't seem like what they would do. They had bumper cars. Oh, somebody on his ear up there. Very often they're climbing all over these things like they just found it. Cool. Carousel. Oh yeah, this place is called Lotus Isle. What an ominous name for this place. So I'll probably talk about carousels later. Yeah, maybe this was an old amusement park and they just founded it and they refurbished it in this case. But some of the stuff does look absolutely industrial. I think there is something to that. I think maybe there's multiple things going on here. And part of it could just be that we just don't understand some of the old world. If you took somebody from 200 years ago, I don't know, 1,000 years ago, and put them here today, and you erased everybody today, they probably would misunderstand some of the things that we do because they just lack context. So I think there's probably some of that happening too. So I picked this Lotus Isle thing because that looks like the Eiffel Tower, and I think that the old world probably spoke English, and so Lotus Isle, maybe that sign already existed there. And I'll bring this up about the, oh man, now I just went blank. Because it's another L one. The amusement parks that I talked about last time, It was almost like there was a chain of amusement parks and they all went by the same name in times past, and they all had the goofy uh, face with the giant grin with the big teeth and stuff. Anyways, this is just Eiffel Tower, right? So I'm just going to read through the rest of the slides. The lotus water lily, euphoria and enlightenment, Oriental and Egyptian mythology. They had a 100-foot neon Eiffel Tower sign. Wow. So I couldn't find any photos of the ballroom, but here, this is the walkathon or the dance-a-thons are very strange phenomenons. So I'm just reading through this, and I'll say anything that pops out to me. It's very, very strange what was happening. The Peacock Ballroom. Thousands in cash and prizes to see how long they could dance. It's weird because it's almost like it's a meme today, that type of thing. And you hear about it every once in a while, but it almost seems like they're just trying to keep that alive today, the idea of these marathon things. But it seems like it really happened and it was extremely popular back then. Whereas today, it seems fringe, and even if it existed, it would probably be rigged. I mean, back then it was probably rigged too. They were talking about controversy and legal stuff. Okay, who else thinks this looks like a composite photograph? The people in the background are flat. Photo manipulation has always existed ever since photography, and the history that they tell us about photography is BS anyways. We've had photography with us since the last reset. So as far as we're concerned in our history, we've always had photography, and photo manipulation has always happened. Those people in the background are, well, I mean, here they say it's faux. Oh my gosh. So there you go. This is an example of the type of trick photography that they would do. So several faux weddings were held in the Peacock Ballroom during the walkathons. It's just a flat image or something. I don't know what's going on, but it's a fake image. And I mean, here they say that it was a faux image, but you could just go research if you want. Look up Victorian era trick photography. They've always been making trick photographs and things, and they know how to manipulate film. But this almost just looks like, I don't know what they were doing here. You can let me know what was happening here. But yeah, it's a fake wedding. Those weren't real people. We have an interior shot, which is interesting because this place allegedly had a 100-foot gold dome on the top, but I couldn't find an image of the golden dome. This is interesting detail work there, just that motif. They got the reflection of the car in this image. Jello Week. In the days before air conditioning, a dance hall or skating rink could get pretty warm on a hot summer night. Stories are told that the skating rink at Lotus Isle had openings. Patrons didn't call them windows, which makes me think that they weren't windows. If they were windows, they probably would have called them windows. This was probably a repurposed building. This is probably one of those instances of they didn't understand the context of what this building was for. With chicken wire across them for ventilation. Skaters learned in a hurry not to touch the wire as they would get a shock. What was happening here? What was going on? So part of the old world was free energy, and it probably was just like a what do you call it? Like a right, basically. Like you have a right to free electricity. It probably was just a thing where anybody could tap into electricity basically however they wanted to in the old world, to an extent. And that the cities themselves were electric. Paris was called the City of Lights. It probably was one of the more spectacular lit up cities. Go back the slides. Earlier in the slides, I had a beautiful picture of lights and reflections and talking about electric parks all over every city. The world used to be more electrified than it is today, and it was free atmospheric electricity, which they still tap into. That's why power lines get set up all over the place. They're actually tapping into that free atmospheric electricity. But the cities themselves used to just be electric. And that's how this society was. Anyway, so in my opinion, they probably just misunderstood what this building was. Or maybe the building itself was making energy because of the people. This is what a friend told me. Oh, maybe the people dancing inside were making the electricity. Somebody brought up tap dancing. This is such a strange. I'm just going to slowly go down. It almost looks like there could be some hidden imagery in the drawing here. They love to hide. Like, this is what artists get good at. People who make art for a living, for them, for the man, they get good at hiding little pictures within the bigger picture and stuff. That's just how they operate. But anyways, something about this aesthetic and the way they used to talk. Oh, look at the two columns on the left and the right, the Boaz and the whatever, the two columns. This is Freemasonry written all over it. Go ahead and read it if you want. The Pied Piper is waiting to welcome you and to help you to play. Come out, step on the gas, fellow carnivalers. Let's make whoopee today. Yesterday's dead, tomorrow's a vision, today is real. What? Who talks like that? Who talks like that? Yesterday's dead, tomorrow's a vision, today is real. Let's be happy. Everybody's happy here. It seems psychotic almost. This comes off as psychotic, this paper, this advertisement. Everybody's happy here and I'm on the air tonight. Well, the prince of the power of the air is Satan. Okay, I want to get through. Here's the dome. I could not find pictures of the dome. The ballroom had a 100-foot golden dome. And a lot of times I think they would go in and just melt down the gold. The gold rush, the California gold rush, coming in and de-techifying all the cities, getting rid of all the golden domes that were everywhere, melting it down and pretend they dug that out. Oh yeah, this giant golden nugget. Yeah, I fished it out of the river. No, you didn't. You melted down a golden dome or you found some trinkets or something in the rubble, in the leftover. That's the real gold rush. That's the gold rush. The fact that they had 100-foot golden domes out in the middle of nowhere waiting to be discovered. So you could go ahead and read this. Interesting, they're saying a fiesta. Anyways, fun makers. Had history taken a different path, Lotus Isle. So this is an example of bullshit. They are so full of hot air and they think that they can just make up stories and that people won't pay attention to the things that don't make sense in their stories. They just think that it's good to just make up stories about everything and that nobody cares whether it makes factual sense or not. But its developers were just greedy and wanted to get the owners to buy them out before they built the park. Their scheme backfired. So many business schemes and people being duped and gangsters and not at all matching 100-foot golden domes and beautiful masonry work. It doesn't match. No. Lotus Isle was eventually built on a shoestring budget. How do you build a 100-feet golden dome and like multiple railroad? This is just the example I was talking about earlier where their stories will be full of bullshit about, oh, it barely got built. Oh, it was so difficult to get this built. We had to get the funding here. We had to blah, blah, blah. They just love talking about it, but it doesn't actually make sense. If you had trouble getting funding, what's up with the 100-foot golden dome on the building? That doesn't... If it maybe almost didn't get built, okay, but how come it did get built? And you built new parking lots and you had 40 rides there and et cetera, et cetera. It's just their stories won't be self-consistent. Red ink played the builders. I just don't believe that. Yada, yada. The yet to be built park. What are you talking about? It had a 100-foot dome already. It clearly was already built. 11-year-old boy drowned just before the opening. The president committed suicide. Possibly psyop, possibly real. The president committing suicide, I don't believe that for a second. These people fake their deaths like none other. Oh, my scheming business is now going under exactly how I wanted it to. And you know how that's a meme too in the media, how these built to spill. is a concept. These places are often made knowing that they're going to burn it down in 3 years, and they're just trying to, uh, they're getting every last penny out of it, make a spectacle of it, and then they'll be getting an insurance claim on it later too. It's built to fail. They wanted it to fail. You know, the producers, the movie The Producers, it's all about that concept of you can make money going into something knowing that you want it to fail. Blah. I've really already said a lot. So I'm just going to look for stuff that really stands out to me. You know, that's a pretty miraculous to survive that plane crash, but the buildings were destroyed. Huh. So the assets were sold in bankruptcy. A bonfire was set to destroy all memory of the park. Man, they certainly have an MO, right? Let it do its thing, give it a backstory, burn it to the ground, and try to bury the memory of it forever so that nobody asks questions. So the carousel, this was really important that they saved the carousel. There's let me bring you back to what we just read about it being a failure, about they couldn't get it built. What? You had a 4-row carousel. That already is a huge amount of investment and time to build that. To do that, a carousel has hand-carved. How can you say that this was a failure if you have a fully built hand-carved carousel? Those two concepts don't make sense. 100-foot gold-plated dome and a fully built carousel, but they saved the carousel from the fire. There's something very interesting and special, unique about these carousels. I do believe carousels are old world, and the simplicity of the carousel, but also the ingenuity of the engineering. Go look into how these carousels, the engineering behind them, it's fascinating. Anyways, I like the carousel thing here. They saved the carousel and they moved it to San Francisco like it's a relic. Today, much of the land where Lotus Island once stood is covered with exclusive living communities that are home to some of Portland's whatever. I mean, to bring me back to the carousel thing, why do they keep the carousels around? Packing up a carousel and moving it, they really are relics. Are they really keeping these carousels up and running, and they have these nonprofit organizations dedicated to preserving the alleged history of them? And what, they charge you 25 cents, $1 to go on it today? It's not about business. It's about the fact that those are relics of the old world, and that the history is much more rich and interesting than they would ever tell you. No, it wasn't carved 100 years ago. It was repainted 100 years ago and rebuilt 100 years ago, but it's probably Tartarian. Look at the... Okay, anyways. It's just totally forgotten about, and now rich people live there. Okay. Here's, Portland Amusement Park. There were 2 amusement parks. These look industrial, like industrial tanks, but they just turned them into pools. So, yeah, I think that there could be something to that. Because when you think of amusement parks too, you don't really think of pools. But all of this would fit together in a industrial setting. You would have industrial tanks for storing things, and various rail for transporting goods. Who knows what these Ferris wheels used to do? Somebody suggested maybe they were part of old generators or something. I don't know what they said, but Ferris being iron, I have no idea. The swings, I think, could have been some sort of centrifuge object for separating things based on density. Oh, this building right here in the back. Do you see the one with the arched roof? They have those buildings all over the place still. Are they just old hangars? And I've seen those exact types of buildings in universities in Oregon that still have those buildings with those dome, or wouldn't call it dome, the arched roofs, really long buildings. Yeah. Anyways, that looks industrial. That thing in the bottom right, those could be industrial in nature. very much looks industrial. But then they got the carousel next to it. So, because I think that there is something about carousels being old world amusement. So, hard to say, but there is something about amusement park rides very much resembling death trap industrial machinery. So, I don't know. Here are just some old pictures of maps. But I thought this was interesting. Peninsula, industrial, factory sites, deep water to the sea. So the place where this existed was industrial on this map. It says that it would be good for industrial things, which I just thought was interesting. That it says that it's for factory sites, that area. I just found that kind of weird. Odd vibes on this photo. You can tell me what you think. Again, I've mostly said already a lot. I got to do more videos on this topic. Maybe looking at historic carousels, because they are really fascinating. Gay Hayden owned all or part of what is now Hayden Island, built a grand home and lived on the island for 5... How are these people all so capable? They're all so capable of building mansions, but they look creepy. A lot of them look creepy. Like, would you let that guy watch your children? But we're supposed to believe everything that they say about what they did. I thought this was hilarious. Was this written by like an AI or something? At the bottom it says, here are the best gay bars near Hayden Island. Because it's gay Hayden. Anyways, 1850. Aerial view. You can pause and look if you want. This is the type of building. There's University or Oregon State University has a building that still looks exactly like this. The largest amusement park in the nation that nobody's ever heard of. 123 acres. So excessive. Wow, that's looking very fancy. On the left there, the two towers too. So that's the Peacock Ballroom entrance on the right. That golden dome. Which I couldn't find a photo of. Can anyone find a photo of the Peacock? Look at these. This is the Oregonian, November. Oh man, can you not? This was very early. Oh man, my screen's cracked. I can't see it way up there. Early 1900s. These places already look ancient. These old homes. Score of Portland houses are ghost haunted. Well, they were just found like that, and these were old world houses, and there's a reason that these look exactly like the goofy houses that appear in any city. Is going to have, basically any city with old world stuff, downtowns, has these old Victorian looking buildings with fascinating features, the strange eclectic castle-y type vibes. So what is it? Are we supposed to believe that all of these people are just getting to a location and they all build these buildings that look so strange and they're all old looking already? It's not remotely believable. So Oregon, I think what makes Oregon really special is that it was one of the last untapped places. It was just sitting there waiting to be discovered and waiting to be founded. And so, yeah, Washington too, probably. I don't know. All of the later states are just, but there's still something special about Oregon. Oregon is the 33rd state. OR is 33, the letters. Or OR is gold in French language. There's something special about Oregon. The tall trees we have here. Anyways, they didn't build this. Portland, Oregon. This would be excessive to build today. And those copper roofs that already look old. Like the green, isn't that already like a copper that has a patina on it? So that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. There will be more on this topic. So, stay tuned and leave a comment. God bless everyone.